Hey everybody, today I'm going to be doing a tier list, something new on this channel that I've never done before, and it is going to be none other than Rancid, one of my favorite bands from the punk genre. So let's get started, shall we? So obviously we start with Rancid 1993, their debut album, released in 1993. This is the album basically made after the downfall and Operation Ivy, two bands that Tim and Matt were involved in before this, and Tim's alcoholism. And you can hear it on this album. It is a lot of songs about addiction, street life, just dark, gritty, grimy. Just, I feel like I'm covered in charcoal, just living on the street and listening to a junkie shout at me. And it's just kind of, you know, it's the essence of the band name Rancid to me. If this was the sole release of Rancid as a band, it would definitely be a classic, leaving people wanting more. And it's to me, it's on par almost with like a GBH or an Exploited album. And I do think Tim Armstrong is kind of very scary on this album. He's just shouting, he seems angry and just in your face. And it's definitely an essential album of the Epitaph Records catalog, and I can't put this any lower than the S tier because this is Rancid in their most pure form, and all the songs on it from, Adina, Hyena, just, Animosity, Whirlwind, it's just all classic stuff that is like, you know, it's like one of those things where you can feel like an artist is like, the suffering artists are like the best. You create the best content, and it's almost like therapy, I feel, for Tim, and it's very good and definitely an essential album. Definite S tier. So moving on to 1994 for their second album, Let's Go, they add Lars Frederiksen to the mix for songwriting, vocals, and second guitar. And so I think this is a step up from, not step up, just sort of a progression from their debut album. And it's a little more poppier, a little more accessible. And I feel like I'm almost, instead of being in that dark, grimy alley on some rainy night with a junkie, I feel like I'm touring around his town in the day while he tells me stories of his life, songs like Dope Sick Girl, Black and Blue, Harry Bridges, Saint Mary. All those songs are very storytelling-ish. And of course, it has the anthems like Nihilism and Salvation and Radio, which is co-written by Billy Joe Armstrong of Green Day, just FYI. It's a little more accessible and definitely is worth its weight along the other sort of legendary albums like Punk and Drublic, Smash and Dookie of the time of the year of 94. Definite S tier. It shows a band that's progressing, not as unhappy and angry as 93, but definitely, you know, it's a different flavor, and I appreciate that flavor. And Lars is very welcome, and it's just, classic, just like 93. So, of course, we move on to Out Come the Wolves, their third album from 1995, and this is the album that everyone who's heard of Rancid probably knows. Time Bomb, Ruby Soho, and other cuts like Maxwell Murder and Olympia are very just, you know they're classic, they're very earwormy, and this is probably, to me, of course, Rancid peaking. Basically, they are firing on all cylinders. Lars is fits in perfectly, and he's basically pulling the band in a different direction than they were from the 93 album, and I love every second of it. And he complements Tim and Matt very well by this point, and I really just I can't say I don't know what to say about this album except that I love it. I had a poster of it on my wall when I was younger, and it was in Ruby Soho was one of those songs I had heard when I was a little kid on a taped compilation that my friend made, but I was never able to track it down until several years later when I heard it again on something else he made me. And I was like, that's that one song that I've been trying to find for all this time. And so Ruby Soho, that song is always going to be a favorite of mine, even if it's attached to the wrestler Ruby Soho now. Even some of the lesser cuts, like, She's Automatic and The Way I Feel, and some of those songs like The War's End, they're classics in my book too. And I don't feel like there's a one bad song on this album. And so obviously it has to be an S, classic of 90s punk and highly recommended. Definitely one of the best of 95 uh, in any genre to me. Um, so Rancid here, okay, so I'll preface by saying this. If Out Come the Wolves was like their London Calling in Clash terms, Life Won't Wait was like their Sandinista. So 1998, they released their fourth album, and that album is experimental. It's all over the place, and it's got everything like trumpets, horns. They've uh, kind of expanded upon the ska sound that they were building on Out Come the Wolves ever so slightly on that album. In now it's kind of full blown into like ska, reggae, and they've just kind of, just branched out there. But before you see that as maybe a bad thing, I think they do all those songs very well. I think songs like Life Won't Wait, Coppers, and even like some of the slower songs like Corazon de Oro and Who Would Have Thought are very good at that. They're very good at doing that there, which I will talk about slow songs in a bit, so stay tuned for that. But anyways, back to Life Won't Wait. They have enough bangers on there too for the fans of the hard punk like Black Lung and Blood Clot, and songs for Out Come the Wolves fans like Something in the World Today, and just 1998, that's a good song too. I think the album has a lot of interesting things, and I just want to keep looking at it, and it puts me in sort of this it puts me in a weird state of mind where it's like I feel like you know, I'm just, kind of experiencing a lot of culture, I guess you could say. But some of the songs on there are not as good as some of the songs like there's some of the songs just aren't classic enough. Like I don't think find myself listening to songs like Cocktails or Cash Culture and Violence a lot. And I can't I don't find myself reaching for Life Won't Wait as much as I do the other three. And it does kind of fall a bit, but not too bad. I'm feeling A for this one simply because it's really good, definitely earns its place in the classic Rancid catalog, but it's a step down from their first three albums to me. I feel like they haven't so much progressed from Out Come the Wolves to this, but sort of, said, we have this album here full of fun, happy ska with some political undertones. Do something about it. And it's very bold and risky, and I appreciate that. And the songs are good. So definitely a album. So moving on to their fifth album, Rancid 2000. I feel like this album is, I've heard it before, but I heard it's a response basically to the press maligning Life Won't Wait quite a bit. They were not digging the weird ska sounds. So Rancid basically flipped them the middle finger and said, "Oh, we can still do punk. Believe me, we can still do it." And so they just, got into the studio and just, you know, hit out a 30-minute hardcore, punkish, screaming loud, angry album. And it's kind of like it works great as a sister album to Life Won't Wait because it's almost the opposite of that, where I felt Life Won't Wait was very calculated and, you know, thought out and a lot of intricacies in this. This one I just feel like they did in one take. I don't, they might have had more, but it feels like they just said, okay, let's just go one take for this and just screw them. And but it's really good. Like I love the song Let Me Go. It's one of their best. I just love the sound of that. It kind of reminds me of the other self-titled album, 93, their first album, but it doesn't feel as raw and authentic as that, if that makes sense. Like it does feel raw, but I feel like at this point in their lives, they're more well off than they were in 93, especially Tim. Um, and I do love how it sounds like Tim is singing through a smoker's cough or a cold the whole album. It really makes him sound like it really kind of, how do you say that? It enhances the impact of an album that is barely being held together by strings. And definite classic, but I don't think it is classic to the, point of their earliest material. So I have to put it next to the album that I just deemed its sister album, Life Won't Wait. So you got a good yin and a yang here. So now we will move into the second half of their current Rancid discography. And we move on to Indestructible, their sixth album from 2003. And this album is nostalgic for me because it literally was the first Rancid album that was the new Rancid album when I became a mega fan of theirs. Yeah, I'm a late bloomer. I got into Rancid really hardcore around 2003. I knew of them before then, but I really just started indulging in them when I was 16 in 2003. I know. But anyways, Rancid Indestructible 2003. Now, the album to me is a very steep drop from the rest of their discography, especially coming off of Rancid 2000. I know Tim got divorced and he has a lot of heartbreak on this album. There's a lot of like, I hate to say, it, but sappy, happy, poppy songs. Even, it's not so much in like a ska sense, but more of like just like a happy, upbeat kind of a feeling. It's fun to listen to, but at the same time, it's very middling, and the album is just, you know, it's not what I want to go to when I listen to Rancid. And while there's no really low lows on the album, there's no really high highs. You could possibly argue that Other Side and maybe Red Hot Moon and Travis Bickle perhaps, but I feel like the album is very just blah. It's got some memorable moments, but it's nothing special. I think you could do without it. And I don't know, I feel bad doing it because I know it's like Tim's heartbreak album and it's kind of like probably very special to him. Songs like Indestructible and Fall Back Down. Um, but it's to me, it's just not a fun album to listen to. And therefore, it's very middle of the road. So I'd have to put it in the mid area of C. Um, and at this point, it's like, they're arguing that Rancid is selling out and all that stuff. And, it's easy to see that. And while I don't necessarily believe that to be true, I don't feel like the product of them, you know, all this stuff is really that good. I do feel like Indestructible is kind of I feel like they tried their best to make a greatest hits album, but instead of releasing a greatest hits compilation, they're like, let's take all of our styles from Let's Go and Out Come the Wolves and 2000 and Life Won't Wait and let's put it in a blender and whatever slop comes out, let's just make an album of that. And I feel like they tried that and it did not work really that well to me. It's a decent album, definite fun to listen to from time to time, but I don't find myself really craving to listen to it a lot. And some of the hits like Fall Back Down are just very just hard to listen to. It's like I have to like take a deep breath and like almost like force it, if that makes sense. Um, so yeah, C is where I feel like it belongs. Nothing too bad, nothing too good. Just kind of middle of the road. And it's a shame because I do like some of the songs on it, but I just don't feel like they hit the mark as well as I would like them to. So 6 years later, and you know, one drummer later, Brett Reed leaves in this time, and they get Brandon Steinekert to come in as their new drummer. And that in their first album with the new lineup of Tim, Matt, Lars, and Brandon Steinekert is Let the Dominoes Fall. And this album to me it's difficult a little bit because this is another nostalgic album for me from the summer 2009. But I feel like there's some very high highs on this, like Last One to Die, great song, better than anything on Indestructible, as is Disconnected, New Orleans, Damnation. Plus, they sound better, they flow better, but at the same time, the last 5 to 6 songs are really terrible. There's the worst Rancid songs I've ever heard. Like That's the Way It Is Now, The Highway, and songs like Locomotive. They're just very cringy almost, and I just don't find myself, I find that's like an anchor around the neck of this album where I feel like if every song was the same caliber of Last One to Die and Disconnected and New Orleans, Damnation, then I feel like the album would definitely be a force to be reckoned with. But I feel like those slower songs and the goofier songs like That's Just the Way It Is Now and You Want It You Got It, they're just very, it's like if Life Won't Wait was not that good, I guess I should say. um like a bad version of that. And it's got some cute songs on it too, like Up to No Good, Dominoes Fall, and Lulu. They all have kind of like a little bit of like a cute bop to them, but at the same time, those and another thing I was gonna say, Civilian Ways and The Highway, I do not like those songs. That is, like I said, like Life Won't Wait gone wrong because they're too slow. They're slow, they're acousticy and very just sort of sappy. Definitely like for a band that made Corazon de Oro and I hope I'm saying that right, by the way, and Who Would Have Thought from Life Won't Wait, I feel like I feel like this I don't hate slow songs, but the acoustic bits just don't do it for me. And plus you get to hear some fun Matt Freeman lyrics on here too, like the LA River song, and he even raps on I Ain't Worried. It's fun to listen to, and I do like that stuff as sort of a guilty pleasure. I'm not gonna rag on that. Pretty fun, but I have to give this album a C because some of the dreck on the worst Rancid songs I've ever heard on like the you know, last back part of this album. It's just, and there's some songs like I don't like East Bay Night is okay, but it's nothing great to me. So I have to put it near Indestructible, whereas Indestructible was more like a middling album with no real highs and no real lows. Last one, I'm sorry, Let the Dominoes Fall, here my head is, the best song on the album. Let the Dominoes Fall is kind of like you got really high highs and the lowest of lows, and it just kind of middles out there. So, yeah. So, we'll move on to Honor Is All We Know, which came 5 years after Let the Dominoes Fall. And to me, this album is it definitely feels like a return to form album. Definitely a drastic improvement over the previous two albums. It's got some really good songs on it, like Evil's My Friend, Collision Course, Back Where I Belong, and the last song, Gravedigger, is pretty good. Um, Nothing super classic that I would think on here. I do like the aforementioned songs are really good and they would fit very well along their classic discography, but it's nowhere on their level, but it's not bad. You know, it's so it's got some high highs, but there's no lows really on it. So it feels like a Motorhead album where it's just like Rancid releasing one giant album that all sounds similar because I mean it does kind of blend together, let's be honest, but it's all one good song, much like a Motorhead album. That's what I was trying to say. I feel like Motorhead does that a lot where they release their whole album sounds like one song. But back to Honor is All We Know. I think it's a good album. So definite improvement over the previous stuff, but nowhere near classic. So it earns its spot in the B tier. Um, and then so then we move to the ninth album of theirs, 2017's Troublemaker. And yeah, I have to say about Troublemaker, there's two songs in here that I remember anything vaguely about, and that is the first song, Track Fast, and I remember enjoying somewhat Farewell Lola Blue, but the rest of the album is not memorable. It's not fun to listen to. It's so whereas Indestructible was an album where just kind of middled along, but I remembered some of the stuff on it, and Dominoes was kind of a, you know, really good on this side, really not so good on this side. Troublemaker has the worst, suffers the worst crime of them all. It is just not, there's nothing memorable. It's just kind of boring. By the time I was on like the 13th track, I was like, okay, when is this thing gonna end? It just, nothing was sticking out. Nothing was really just grabbing me and saying, I love this. I could usually pick out one or two songs, even on some of the lesser albums that I liked. But on Troublemaker, I could not find really one thing that I would, you know, this album did not need to really exist for me. It sounds almost like a cover band it sometimes. So I sorry, but I have to put this at a D for all those Troublemaker fans out there. It's just not that good, but it's not terrible. I mean, it's just kind of there and it's nothing I want to revisit. I mean, I tried revisiting the last three albums, Honors All We Know, Troublemaker, and uh, the one we'll talk about soon. But Troublemaker to me was like, why am I listening to this? And definitely the worst Rancid album that I've heard thus far. I mean, I've spent several years now trying to get this thing to grow on me, and it just never does. So, yeah, it's a D. So, now we're moving to the recent 10th album from 2023. That is Tomorrow Never Comes, which to me, again, it's got kind of the Motorhead feeling, like Honor is All We Know. Way better than Troublemaker. It's kind of very much like it almost sounds like one long good song, like much like I said the Motorhead analogy earlier. There are some songs in here that I really do like the title track and Devil in Disguise, and there's a few other songs I'm not really picking the titles off of my head right now that near like the beginning and towards the end that I really like, that stick out, but I just can't for the life of me think about them right now. The titles, I mean, they're not coming to me. But definitely I would put this in the B tier next to Honors All We Know because the songs on it that I do like are probably strong enough to I've re-listened to this a few times and I could put it on and enjoy it. But again, it's nothing on the level of their classic stuff, of course. It's kind of at that middling tier of Honors All We Know, of the B tier. And I'm happy with B tier albums. If they only release albums similar to Tomorrow Never Comes, for the rest of their career, I will be happy with that. Um, so that's it. That's my tier list here. Let me know what you think. Was I too hard on some? Was I too easy on some? Did I forget some stuff? Um, so yeah, that's it. Thank you.